everyone, to our live fireside huddle today. We at BIPOC Executive Search will begin this discussion by acknowledging that we are meeting on Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. As immigrant settlers, we're grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Long before today, as we gather here, there have been Aboriginal peoples who have been the stewards of this place. In particular, we wish to acknowledge the ancestral traditional territories of the Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe, and in particular, the Mississaugas of the New Credit, whose territory we are gathering on today. This territory is covered by the upper, what is now known as Canada, treaties. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples have made, both in shaping and strengthening this community in particular, and our province and country as a whole. As immigrant settlers, we are guests on this land. We invite you to reflect on the connection and relationships amongst the land, people, history, the recognition of the contributions and historic importance of Indigenous peoples must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities, to reflect on what happened in the past and what actionable, tangible, meaningful changes can be made going forward in order to further the reconciliation process. Thank you all so much for sharing space with us today as we delve into a conversation on the effects of unsuccessful job searches on your self-esteem and mental health, which, as we know, can evoke all sorts of feelings within. Today, we pause with you. We huddle together, knowing and feeling that we can count on each other to share, listen, and explore ways in which we may be better able to take care of ourselves. I do want to share with you that Melissa will guide us through a relaxing meditation practice towards the end of our session. Stay tuned. And if you choose to, you may want to gather a pen and a notepad as part of this exercise as you get in tune with your surroundings and your inner core. So please stay with us, share, experience, and engage. I would like to welcome all of these amazing human beings, along with all of our amazing listeners. My colleagues, Stacey Ann Buchanan, Candice Frederick, Melissa Simnot, and Shirley Lay. Shirley, perhaps we can start off by you sharing with us what you feel is important for others who may be listening to us today to know as we huddle together for the next 45 minutes or so.
Thank you, Irmela, for passing over the baton. It's a great pleasure to share space with my beloved colleagues here. I have a couple things to share prior to us starting this conversation. Today, we're going to be more solution focused. We're going to be sharing some tips and strategies. But I invite everyone to be mindful of a couple things. The first is, as you can tell, all of us on our team come from different social locations. That means all of us possess different identity markers. For myself, I identify as being a Chinese woman, cis, straight, able-bodied, who has had the privilege of going to higher education. And so some of the thoughts that I will be sharing will be unique from my perspective. For those who carry the similar identities might find resonance in that. For others who carry different identities or different intersections of identities, keep in mind that you're invited to take whatever it is that is suitable for you and leave everything behind. I love Melissa's analogy in that be a sieve and sift out the information that's useful for you, leave everything else behind, and that's totally okay. The second piece is that I want to recognize that everyone's on different journeys and paths in terms of self-discovery and liberation. For some people, you might have the privilege and bandwidth to thrive in your work setting. And so some of the strategies and techniques that we're going to be sharing today may be more applicable to you. For other people who are still in very toxic, oppressive systems, your bandwidth may be smaller. You may not have the wiggle room to experiment with different ways of being. It might be safest to do what is known to you. And so some of these strategies may not be as applicable, but know that they are here waiting for you whenever it is that you have greater psychological safety to pick up the pieces of information. So even if it doesn't apply now, it's okay. There's nothing defective about you. You can just keep them as part of your toolkit and bring them out whenever it's needed. Thanks, Armilla. Back to you.
Thank you, Shirley, for sharing that mindful approach that you always give so beautifully. Candace, perhaps we can start off with you. If you can tell us, this is such a huge topic, and we know it impacts self-esteem in so many ways. I was wondering if you could start us off by drawing from your own experience or perspectives from others, perhaps with relationships from education versus experience. What are your thoughts?
Okay, thanks for that, Armilla. And I mean, I've given a lot of thought to that, over the course of my life and my working life in particular. And I think that sometimes I've been focused on getting, X role and then thinking about the education I needed to get that position. But I also found that even when I had the education, I didn't always have the experience. And the reverse was also true. When I had the experience, I didn't always have the education. So I think for me, what's been helpful is that I started asking a very different kind of question around the impact that I wanted to have. And I think this helped me to really consider many different kinds of opportunities that maybe I wouldn't have been open to. So it allowed me to consider teaching for the first time. It allowed me to say yes to like a director level role. And it even led me down the path of, recruiting in this space. And I have to admit that, at times my own pathway feels unusual to go from community health and education to here. But I think that if I was solely focused on education or experience, then I wouldn't have been, open to this. And I think that people in my life have really helped to encourage me, push me to see myself in different ways. And as a result, I often think about, my lens, my skills, my work with marginalized communities, and my leadership more so than those pieces that are specific to education and experience. And I think there are people that I think about also who have helped to reinforce that for me in the public domain. Like, I think about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her journey from waitressing to politics, and the things that she said about, how that has helped to prepare her for dealing with difficult customers, so to speak. And, I draw upon examples like that as I think about that question for myself. And ultimately for me, access and innovation are not separate things. Like they're two very connected things. And I think that's where I land for me.
Wow, no, thank you for sharing that wisdom that you're able to bring, not knowing where that journey will take you and willing to let it flow, right? And then draw from those pieces that mean the most. I know for one, we're delighted that you're here at BIPOC Executive Search, and so are the clients and so are the candidates and everyone who interacts, and in being able to bring all of those pieces towards solutions and to helping people. And so today, everyone, thank you, Candace. Today, as you know, it's a fireside huddle. It's a little bit of a different question and answer exchange. And so I invite my colleagues. You'll notice the lovely Stacey Ann Buchanan, who is now your host today. She is sharing her wisdom, being an expert in the mental health space as well. And so if any of my colleagues would like to chime in, Stacey Ann, what are your thoughts?
Everything that Candace said was so beautifully said. I remember when I was thinking about this question and I thought about my personal journey and everything that I've done. So I've been a hostess. I've done the hosting thing. And I remember when I first got the job, I was like, maybe this job isn't really for me, but the skills that I've learned dealing with irate customers, letting customers feel comfortable, welcome them in a space where if this is their first time, they feel like, oh, I definitely want to come back. And so when I these skills that I learned through my experience, not through an educational formal education, then propelled me into the world of like when I'm doing public speaking, you know, as an actress, even especially in this space, being in this space, people's skills and being able to be in a situation when you can diffuse a hot flame, where you can diffuse a hot bulb per se, it is something that doesn't, it's something that takes a lot of learning to do per se. I wouldn't say necessarily saw a lot of skills, but being in the field, being in the mud, all of that experience brings me to everything that I come by. And so when I look at my experience, even as an actor, even going to theater school and film school and learning to present, and somebody that struggles with anxiety, not just as a mental health advocate, I do struggle with anxiety. So I have the lived experience, and going up front and speaking, you know, a lot of my training from theater school and film school, how to feel out an audience, how to take your breaths inside and out, really helps propel me in this space. And also, as a mental health advocate and somebody who struggles with anxiety, these trainings come really hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Those are life skills, I would say. That emotional intelligence and quotient that we can all gain and then share from those experiences. I think that's what stays with us throughout life. Melissa, what feel free.
In terms of, you know, those pieces really connect in with me in terms of, you know, if we're talking about experience versus education, you know, education taught me some things. Experience taught me a whole lot more, right? And so, you know, for me, it is this piece around, you know, that experience helps us navigate through the complexities, like what Candace and Stacey Ann were saying, and you as well, Urmila, right? They help us anticipate what others may not have anticipated, right? When things like an irate customer, or, you know, experience I would have had when I was first starting out, right? How I navigate, how I pivot, how I anticipate things and reverse engineer from that with that knowledge has been more valuable than taking a sociology course. That's my particular opinion. So, you know, for me, that really resonates.
Mm-hmm. You know, that's really empowering for anyone, you know, really stuck on a piece of paper, which is important. It's essential, right? Like you said, it's differences of opinions.
Yeah.
But the way you're able to pivot depending on what matters to you and what is required in the world and what your strengths are, I think that's where things truly start to blossom. Shirley, what are some ways that you feel you've pivoted, you know, with respect to this? Not that you've needed to pivot in this category. Shirley is a doctor of psychology. I would like to share that with you. And so we're hearing from our many colleagues from different perspectives, and Shirley brings that educational wisdom as well from her generations and from her intellectual capacity. Shirley?
Thank you, Urmila. I love what my colleagues have shared so far. Something that I'd like to add to this is that this question about education versus experience is really a question about what are the ways of knowing, who gets to say that they can produce knowledge, and who's gatekeeping that knowledge, right? In our culture and society, we have this emphasis on the scientific way of knowing. And that's why there's this huge emphasis on people having degrees, is that we think that knowledge is produced when there's this mind-body split, right? We just use our heads, we reduce things into little itty bits, and we study them in isolation. And that's how we say as a culture that knowledge is produced. But for a lot of us, we come from cultures where ways of knowing is being with nature. Ways of knowing is being connected to our bodies, to our families, to our ancestral knowledge, to our foods. Those are very valid ways of being. And so for audience members out there who are wondering, do I have any value? Do I add any value? Am I qualified to be a scholar? I say yes, because scholarship is about deriving knowledge through your way of knowing. If it's through being in contact with your heart, with your body, with your soul foods, whatever it is, everybody can be a scholar and produce information. And so, I want to draw on one of our colleague, Gloria Bachler. She's the client care specialist here. She talks about the importance of emphasizing international experience. She talks about how traveling and understanding how different ways of being and living in the world has taught her to be a specialist in relationships, essentially, right? Being able to cross-pollinate and communicate across cultures. This is a form of intelligence. There's courses and certification on intercultural communication. The piece that you talked about in terms of emotional intelligence, Urmila, that's not explicitly taught in our formal education system. So if you come from a collectivistic background, you are probably very skilled in relational intelligence and emotional intelligence. And I want to bring up some of the thoughts from Jason Murray, who's the president and managing partner of our firm, in that he said, form a compelling argument in creating those ties, letting these employers know that your way of learning and knowing and viewing the world is just as valid, and you're going to be the one to show them how it ties into some of the requirements, the duties, responsibilities that they're looking for. And so these are the types of conversations I often have with people to let them know that it's totally okay to put down those pieces in your cover letter. Making those ties explicit. If they're looking for this skill, let them know what is it about your worldview or your perspective that you bring that will help them resolve whatever issue it is that the employer might be looking for. So I would say dig deep, go into yourself, into your ancestral self, and bring through that knowledge, and tie it in with whatever it is an employer is looking for. And certainly don't do that in isolation, do that in community. So people like us, we're really good at saying, hey, I think I see a strength here, and leveraging that in conversations.
Thank you for that wisdom, that perspective, and all of these wonderful perspectives. You spoke of heart and mind. I'm reminded of a quote or a reference to something that I grew up with, which is our head, our heart, and our hands should really be working in unison. And if that happens, then we're really at our core being, and that focus on solutions as opposed to putting yourself in a box as to what somebody else has created. Who are you? What do you represent? And what can I solve in this world? That's something else that Jason Murray speaks of as well. What is it that we can solve? There's so much within you, and there's so much that we can do to contribute to that. Let's move on to, one of the other effects that can occur, that we can sort of spur up within ourselves, and that's the concept of imposter syndrome as we look at these things, education versus experience, etc. Melissa, I wonder if you'd like to share regarding imposter syndrome, perhaps personal experiences, your thoughts, your tools.
Oh, for sure. That idea of not good enough comes up, right? Not good enough, whether it's the society telling me, whether it's myself telling me, and whether it's someone else telling me or myself telling me, I have the same kind of physiological reaction to it in terms of my mind, my heart. And so when I think about imposter syndrome, I think about two voices that are in my head. I have my inner champion and I have my inner critic. And sometimes the inner critic snatches the mic and has a pretty strong grip on it, let's say. And so I have to be really intentional about that. First of all, it's the noticing of it. The noticing of, who do you think you are? That's one of them, right? Or you don't know this. And I would give a little bit of a gift here. If I catch myself saying, I don't know this, I always put the word yet at the end of that sentence. I don't know this yet. I can figure it out, right? And so it's first recognizing what the voice sounds like, right? I've nicknamed my inner critic. I won't share it here just in case it's someone's name, but I've nicknamed it, and I've created a bit of levity to come associated with this inner critic that helps me laugh when I hear this voice. So sometimes I assign my imposter a task. Don't need you right now. You're here for note taking. Sometimes it's me encouraging my inner champion to grab the mic to say, no, you've done tough things before. You can do this. You can figure it out. And, you don't need to do it in isolation. You can reach out to your community and your networks to help you with figuring it out. You don't have to be on it on your own. It's something that's really resonated to me in terms of folks here at the firm, this piece around collective care. And, it's this piece around not just saying collective care, but actually actioning it. So it's to say, okay, Melissa, we got you. Let's brainstorm together. Let's huddle together. Let's figure it out together. That's some things that come up for me when I think about imposter syndrome.
No, thank you for sharing. And Stacey Ann has had to disappear just for a moment, but she's back, and she's here to just at the right time to follow up on what Melissa was saying with respect to imposter syndrome. But before we go to Stacey Ann, Melissa, do you find it becomes easier, or has it become easier to be aware of that voice, or does it sometimes, tend to take still a little bit longer? What is that sense of flow there?
Oh, I really appreciate that question. It's a journey. What this looked like 3 years ago, 5 years ago, today is different. And I'm still on a journey. So sometimes, I feel it in my body first. Sometimes it's because my chest has gotten really tight, my shoulders are up to here, my jaw's clenched, and it's something perhaps I haven't done before. And so I'm needing to sort of figure it out and pivot. For instance, one of our last lives, I was hosting, and it was the first time I was hosting. And I thought, oh, these are big shoes to follow. Stacey Ann is usually our wonderful host, right? And so that imposter syndrome came out of me, and she came out strong and loud. And so that noticing piece is really helpful, because what it does is it says to me, I don't want to live here. I can visit when this voice comes up. It's going to come up. So there's some radical acceptance that comes through with that. Instead of getting down on myself of why am I getting down on myself, there's some radical acceptance of this is what happens sometimes, particularly if I'm trying something new, and that's okay. That's okay. So that noticing piece has helped me shorten the visit of when I go there. That's what I would say there.
And you were a wonderful host, as wonderful as Stacey Ann, and I know too well what imposter syndrome is looking like, because this is my first time hosting. But I love that we're so vulnerable as as human beings, as sisters and brothers and just people, in being able to share that live on air, no matter how much of a basket case I may have been just a few minutes prior, and focusing on this community, like Shirley says all of the time. And how do we share? How do we make ourselves aware? What techniques do we do? And how are we progressing if that's what our journey is? Yeah, and I know this is something that is close to your heart as well, and how you've overcome imposter syndrome and move forward with it day to day. What are your thoughts?
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say, yeah, when we talk about imposter syndrome, I think when we talk about marginalized communities and BIPOC individuals, we know this all too well because we're raised to always be better than, or to be 10 times as good just to get through that door. And so that is always in the back of our heads. And sometimes even when we know we're good enough, we know that we can ace this, we know we can go and we can slay it left, right, and center, there's still that little noise, or still that little inner critic that comes out of the shadows and say, but are you sure? Right. And that's why it's really important when we give ourselves, like for instance, myself, like affirmations, have to get myself through this. I have a friend that says it's not imposter syndrome, it's imposter syndrome moments. So we go through it, it's fleeting, it comes and it goes. And anytime the little inner critic comes in, because, well, I shouldn't say little because sometimes it's not little, it comes around, we have to address it in such a way where it's just like, okay, you're saying this, but I know who I am. I know what I'm qualified for. I know that I can do this. So the belief in yourself has to be really greater. It has to be so strong and to the forefront. I struggle a lot with imposter syndrome. I have the imposter syndrome moments. I go through it. And then I have to recognize who I am. We had a conversation prior to the live. We were backstage, and Candace, you had mentioned something about when a friend can tell you everything that you've done, has listed off things, and you're like, hold on, I did that. And so sometimes I like to use the term that you really have to big up yourself. And I say it in a way of congratulating yourself every time, giving yourself that clap, giving yourself that flowers before you go out there and seek it or tend to see that the world needs to give you that. You have to start within yourself. You have to give it to yourself. Even if you make a list, what I like to do is when I'm going through the imposter syndrome moments, or I'm going through a period where I'm not too sure of myself, I like to record some things. I like to get rid of the inner critic and try to tell myself the amazing things that I've done. Especially, I like to do this. Let me correct myself. I like to do this, especially when I'm on a high, when I feel really good. I've done something really great. I record what I'm doing. And so when that little inner critic voice comes up again, let me replay my accomplishments. Let me replay things that I've done. Let me replay why I am great and why I deserve to be in this room, at that door, at that table. Let me remind myself of who I am. And I just want to say to the audience, I'm a mom. I have a toddler. She's not sleeping. And so I had to rush out. Okay.
I absolutely love this recording your like a brag file where you're doing some voice memos, and in those times when you're feeling like, okay, I'm in my power, I'm walking with my strengths, and to record that. Love that. Absolutely love it.
No, a wonderful, Stacey, and so it's not just in your head anymore,
Yeah.
right? You're not just seeing it, you're hearing it. You're not just reading it. All of those things are important. You're hearing yourself saying it. I can just imagine how much oomph that gives, right? To take on whatever comes next. Candace, is there anything you'd like to share here?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that Melissa and Stacey Ann have already covered, they've laid some really good ground in terms of things that also, resonate for me. And I think just, even though we know that imposter syndrome is such a real experience, I think, for me personally, and talking to candidates and friends and people, that it can also be a hard thing to talk about, when you're starting to feel essentially less than and you're not sure why. To connect back to some of what you're saying, Melissa, whether that's coming, internally, or it's coming from, the structures and the environments that we're in, where we're also not seeing ourselves represented. So I think I just, that's kind of my entry point into answering that a little bit. And so just reflecting on, moments for me where I've had to talk myself through, that experience, or I've had to reach out to that community, or I've had to create it. Sometimes that's really been, the truth. And just even thinking about when I was teaching for the first time, and and it's not a space where I had seen, or there were like a lot of Black women. And I think some of the things that really helped me, as I'm thinking about that mindset about having to be twice as good, and then having to do so many reminders around what I was bringing and what my worth was. And I think some of the things that really helped came from mentors, and peers. And so I also want to say, sometimes with mentors, for many years, I was like, I don't have a mentor, like I need to get one. And then I just realized that there are so many different models of mentorship. My peers are my mentors, my family members, ancestors. Like, you can define that in whatever way is meaningful for you. So I just want to say that, you know, even if you don't think you have mentors, you probably do. And so, you know, one of the things that I recognized was that, again, being in spaces with people who were in a similar experience with me. So in this case, you know, other faculty who were also teaching for the first time, and having to create that and kind of come together. I think that was the thing that made the biggest difference for me, that reminded me what I could bring, what I could offer, and that I was in good company with other people. And I feel like that's sometimes the piece with imposter syndrome that I can easily let go of and forget about, is that collective piece. Because your thoughts start to feel that they're particular only to you.
Mm.
And that's the beauty of us in this forum, right? And having that, creating that collective community with everyone, as we hope to do. Shirley, I'm going to ask you to pipe in here, as well as maybe delve into one of the things that we often wonder: what is my name? Who am I? Where do I live? And how much is that contributing to what the end result may be? And so how do I navigate, through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So much good stuff has been shared already. So I would love to do just a quick recap, just in case there's any audience members who are chiming in just now. So we're just talking about imposter syndrome and strategies to cope. Melissa taught us a great lesson in being self-aware and being reflective, catching moments. Stacey Ann talked about considering these moments being temporary. That they're only here for a short while, and that there are other aspects to you that should take as much airspace and time in your psyche. And then Candace brought us home in terms of making sure that we have people who have our best intentions at heart, and to ask them for wisdom or guidance or advice in moments of self-doubt. So I wanted to touch on a couple of things, and then I'm definitely going to go into the name piece. First is in terms of my own strategy for managing imposter syndrome. I borrow a lot from the work of Resmaa Menakem, who's a US-based somatic abolitionist. And there's pure magic when I share virtual space with him, and he'll look into the camera, and I feel like he's like looking in my soul, and he'll say, "You are not defective," right? So Urmila, you're not defective. Stacey Ann, you are not defective. Candace, you are not defective. And Melissa, you are not defective. That's a daily mantra I say to myself all the time. And I do it first thing in the morning, and I will repeat those words over and over again until my body hears it. I know my body has heard it. As soon as my shoulders drop down, my jaw drops, there's this sense of lightness in my heart. So I know that that has taken shape. And the second piece is I'm borrowing from the work of Sarah Ahmed. She's the one who wrote Feminist Killjoy. In her book, at the very end, Cherish It a Lot, she talks about creating a survival toolkit. And I love it. A good friend of mine started my survival toolkit. So she gifted me the book and then gave me a couple things to start my survival toolkit. And they're actually some of the things that Stacey Ann has already mentioned. They're mementos, they're cards, they're gifts from people who have told me that I matter, and that I am of value, and that I am a somebody in their lives. And so it's actually sitting right next to me, and it's always close to me because I need to touch it, absorb the energy, and like hold on to dear life when I'm like, I can't do this. It's literally holding on to dear life, and then holding on long enough until it passes, like Stacey Ann had mentioned. So those are some tips that I want to share with audience members in case you needed a few more to add into your toolkit, in addition to some of the wonderful things that have already been shared today.
No, wonderful. Stacey, sorry, Shirley, do you mind sharing the name of that book again and the author in case anyone would like to purchase it?
Yeah, for sure. So Sarah Ahmed, her name is Sara, and then Ahmed, Ahmed, and Feminist Killjoy. If you want to Google that, you'll be able to find some of her work.
Perfect. Thank you. You were going into the name and address portion as well. Perhaps you can start us off there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. So I used to work at a college counseling center, and I've had many students who are in their third or fourth year, about to graduate, and entering into the workforce. And my passion commitment has always been working with BIPOC students. And so I get asked this question quite often about the name. I get asked about pronouns. Should I put those in? I get asked about clothing, about tattoos, piercings, anything that demonstrates a person's personal as well as political identity. And I would always give the suggestion of having the person listen to their internal gut in terms of what's right, what's wrong. I tell them sometimes for survival reasons, to get your foot in the door, you may need to conform to code switch, right? Do what you think your oppressor needs you to do to get in. And then once you have social capital, you can start to reveal more parts of you. And at other times, you might be more bold and say, I don't care. I'm going to write my name boldly at the top of my resume, because I come from a culture where last name is huge. It says a lot about where my family's from, where I'm connected to, or my name means something in my cultural background. So I'm going to put it on there. And I would say, yeah, go for it. Either direction you want to take, go for it. I think it's determining what's at stake for you. If this is an organization that you really want to get into, then there are moments when you might have to code switch and adapt to the environment to get in, and then you infiltrate in that way. And then there are some times where it's not safe. It's just completely not safe to reveal all parts of you, because that organization needs to demonstrate that they're committed to being there with you and for you. So I would say there's a few things to think about. And last thing I will say before I hand it back over to you is to look at, what is that organization that you're trying to get into? If it requires you to cut off half of you to get in, is that something you're willing to bear? Or do you want to enter into spaces where you never have to cut off any parts? And I'm really happy to say I don't have to do that in this space with you all at the firm. And so that's why I'm willing to share all parts. So those are some things to think about. Safety, where are you putting yourself? And whatever you decide to do, it is the right route, even if it means not revealing parts of self.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Thanks for looking at both sides of that, right? And what it could mean depending on where you are in your journey. Melissa, what are your thoughts on this?
I am a proponent of outflow determines inflow. And what I mean by that is, if I'm standing in all of me and I put that out there, then the people, the organizations that align to that start to come to me. Now, I have the advantage of having a name that's pretty Western, Melissa, right? My Indian name, given name is Tara, which is also pretty, let's say palpable, right? And I also know that someone's name is the sweetest sound to them. And so I would say, going back to what Shirley point is doing that assessment of which organizations do you want to be a part of, right? And I'd add to that in terms of, if you have this kind of struggle with name, I would say have that part of your cover letter in terms of part of your story. It's part of your unique, authentic story, and to own that. And that could be a space. We're thinking about a cover letter being sort of a conversation starter. That could be an interesting space to put that in. So those are kind of my thoughts that come up there.
I see Stacey Ann doing some amens in the back there. Stacey Ann, jump in.
Yes, just amen to everything that both Shirley and Melissa shared. It's so important. I made it a habit a few years ago. Sometimes I like to make an excuse that my Jamaican accent makes it hard for me to pronounce names. And I was just like, you know what? No, it's not about my accent. It's important for me to get your name right. And I'm just piggybacking off everything that you said, because everything that you both said, I am in agreement with, but this is my piece that I want to add. It's also very important to own your name and to own it in such a way that you don't let anyone mispronounce it. And if they do, you can correct them. You can politely correct them, because I think that's one of the key to like owning who you are, is to own that part of you, own your name. And what I love that LinkedIn has done is there's a button that you can say your name. For anyone that doesn't know how to pronounce your name, you can actually record the saying of your name. So if someone's looking at your profile, they can press it and see. And so it's very important of that ownership, is to own who you are. And for me, I make it a habit now to definitely, if I don't say it correctly, please correct me. And I will spend 10 times trying to say it to make sure that I give you that honor that you deserve. That's what I want to add to that.
And it's all about just the beauty that you're all bringing in, the perspectives. It's all about that breaking what people may have perceived about a name to begin with, right? I've always owned my name, and it's always been a topic of discussion, frankly, because Urmila is it's an East Indian name. I'm from the Caribbean. I look like I could be from the various parts of the world. My last name connotes a different religion, which is actually my ex-husband's last name. And, my children have these different variations of their name as well. And so to me, what that has represented is that oneness, that humanity. And it's always been positive. I've always looked at it as a positive conversation starter whenever anyone asks, how do you say your name? Where are you from? And isn't that what it's all about that, who are you? Tell me a bit about you, that story. Who are you really? Candace, I'm going to throw it to you. And I know we're getting close to that time for Melissa's peaceful meditation journey. What would you like to add, Candace?
Yeah, not too much, because I think that, my colleagues and collaborators have said a lot. But, yesterday, last night actually, I saw this article about, Scotiabank and how they're using software where they're not asking for, mostly in a student context, and as part of their campus hiring initiative, to submit resumes. And they're finding, as part of that process, that they are getting, more diverse applicants. And that didn't really, when I read that didn't really surprise me too much. And I think through this process and this journey that we've been on in terms of recruitment and different ways of doing things and talking about, relationship building, that I guess one of the things I think about is that, it doesn't boil down to the paper, but I also recognize that the paper is sometimes how we get entry point into, these environments. But I would agree with, my colleagues in terms of like, let your name really be, a strength that adds to your story, to your work story, to your life story. And also it says something about, the lens that you might offer and bring. And I think that is never something to kind of shy away from, but, choose your engagement with that as well, in terms of what makes sense for you and where you're at. But I think it really is around, perspective and story and so many different things. And I think it's always worth thinking and reevaluating and thinking about, what you want to offer, what that can offer. And so those are some of the thoughts that I think about.
No, that's all really lovely. It puts perspective on, is it an emotional toll or is it an emotional journey as we share this space? And I hope that we've all gleaned, I have, some tools and techniques from each of you on this panel. And I invite the audience to perhaps share in the comment section some tools that they find works really well for them, that we can hopefully put together and share with others who may not have the opportunity to listen to this conversation. Of course, it will be live, will be aired on our YouTube channel. It's there for your viewing whenever you need these tips. I think it's time for us to go into our little moment of peace with. So take us there, Melissa.
Thank you so much. For anyone that's watching that may want to come back to this, we're at about 46 minutes, 26 seconds. So you can go back to the recording on our YouTube BIPOC Executive Search page. I invite you to get comfortable in your chair. Get comfortable in your chair, sit back with your feet firmly on the ground. I invite you to close your eyes. Straighten out your spine. Bring those shoulders down and back. And just take a deep breath in here. In and out. Bring your focus, we're on your chair that's firmly on the floor, that's anchored in your home, that's grounded in the earth. And let's take a deep breath in here. In. Big exhale out. And I want you to take a moment and visualize your happy place. Maybe it's a beach. Maybe it's in the mountains or with friends or somewhere else. Just take a moment to visualize that happy place. And breathe in. And deep breath out. And in that happy place, I want you to look around and take note of 5 things you can see. What are 5 things you can see in your happy place? Maybe it's the birds or the water or something else. What are 5 things you can see? Breathe in. And exhale out. What are 4 things you can touch in your happy place? Maybe it's the sand or the bark on the trees. What are 4 things you can touch in your happy place? Take a deep breath in here, in, and big exhale out. What are 3 things you can hear in your happy place? Maybe it's laughter or the water lapping up on the shore. What are 3 things you can hear? Take a deep breath in here, in, and exhale out. What are 2 things you can smell in your happy place? What are 2 things you can smell? Maybe it's the grass. Maybe it's the leaves on the ground. Maybe it's something else. What are 2 things you can smell? And take a deep breath in here, in, and big exhale out. What's 1 thing you can taste in your happy place? What's 1 thing you can taste? Is it the salt of the ocean? Maybe it's something else. What's one thing you can taste in your happy place? And take a deep breath in here, in, and big exhale out. And I want to bring your attention back into the earth that your home is grounded in, up to the floor that your chair is on, into your seat that's being firmly held by your chair. And take a deep breath in here, in, and exhale out. And when you're ready, I invite you to slowly open your eyes, coming back into this space, into this moment of time. So lucky to be alive. And I want you to take a moment with that pen and paper that's close by to reflect on where you went to your happy place. Feel free to drop a comment and share with us, or note it to yourself. Where did you go? What did you see? What did you touch and hear and smell and taste? Take a few moments here to note that down. And for the next time where we're feeling like perhaps our imposter syndrome is creeping up, or something showed up as a difficult conversation or tension, I want you to hold that happy place close by. You might feel after this meditation feeling a bit more calm. Isn't that amazing, the power of our mind? And so I'll leave you there. Back over to you, Irmela.
I think we should just stay in silence for a minute here, give everyone time to absorb and note down and focus on where that happy place is.
And perhaps, I was just going to say, perhaps someone within our space here would like to share where they went to their happy place. Where did you go?
Who would like to share?
I can share. I went to the beach.
Mm.
I went to the beach. I was holding my daughter's hand, and there's a sand. I didn't even want to come back. There was a sand. I could smell the roast corn for some reason. I was like, roast corn.
Love that.
She hasn't been to a beach, but somehow it's just like, she hasn't been to one, but I'm like, I was there. Well, thank you.
She's
there.
She was there.
Did you taste that roast corn too, CCI?
Yeah, roast corn. I was like,
Love it.
it was beautiful. Thank you. I don't know about the audience, but this was so well needed. I really appreciate this. Thank you so much, Melissa.
My pleasure.
That was very calming and divine, Melissa. Notice I'm still in a state of Zen. Candace or Shirley, would you like to share anything just before we wrap up?
Yeah, I too, Stacey, I didn't want to come back. No longer. Give me a few more seconds. But when I opened my eyes, some of you were still had your eyes closed. It was so soothing to watch all of your faces just relax. Your facial expressions were so peaceful. And there was something healing in me seeing all of that. And then our bodies kind of vibing together, like in that space. Even though we're virtual, I still felt the energy. So thank you, Melissa, for guiding us through that, and beautiful, giving us a few moments of pausing seconds, Irmela. That was great.
Candace, you have 1 minute to share where you went if you'd like to.
No pressure, right?
You can go
I
there.
also went to the beach because I love going to the beach. And there definitely was some barbecue happening. Not roast corn. Maybe I'll add that in next time. And yeah, thank you so much, Melissa, for just, I think it's such a good reminder of just, for me, slowing things down a bit, but also just that, you know, the answers are within. And I think I'll just leave it there.
Sorry, I was just trying to find the unmute button because I still just want to be quiet. Thank you, Candace. You know, we hope, it is our hope that you have found a few moments of reflection and peace and belief in how you will continue to be all parts of who you are moving forward in your journey. And we are here to celebrate and uplift you in every step of the way. I would like to say deep gratitude for pausing to connect with us. Hopefully we've given you some tools, helped in some way to harness your creative mind and the belief of holding on to your personal dreams and desires. Those are yours. And that may change not just your life, but others' lives. I would like to make reference to our colleague, Lori Toulouse, who shared this wonderful quote on our Monday, Motivational Mondays, which we put out. And one part of that says, the power to learn, grow, and discover is yours and available to those who seek it. And hopefully today we've helped you to learn, and along in your growth journey, as we are all growing, and in the discovery process of all of these tools and techniques that we can use to become all that we know we can be, all that we feel we can be. I'm also reminded of the phenomenal Maya Angelou, whose words, as we all know, affected millions of lives. And I used the word phenomenal on purpose, phenomenally woman, phenomenally human being, as all of you are. She created so much positive change by sharing and that affirmation, her affirmation journey that has uplifted so many. And so can you. You know, I think that her message says that these tests of endurance define us as human beings, not only in how we react to falling down, but also in how we pick ourselves back up, how we dust ourselves off and try again, whether it's physically or in our minds and our hearts. And so we encourage you to continue to chase your dreams, believe in your vision, do it with compassion, with kindness, with insight. Go forth and let that vision transform into whatever reality you can manifest for the better. Until we meet again, I believe this is our last live for this year. So until we meet again in the new year, stay well, stay peaceful, and be you. Much love.